Okay, well, welcome everyone. It is 1:05. We are going to go ahead and get started. We know that many of our directors who typically join us are otherwise engaged right now with other things, as we can all appreciate and imagine. So we're going to go ahead and get started and talk through a couple of the topics we had planned, and then we will open it up for questions. We do apologize that you are not able to hear Helen right now. We are having some intermittent difficulty with the technology. We are assuming it's due to the storms that we had and our loss and regaining of internet. So Helen's got a lot of crackling and distortion, so she has herself muted, but she will chime in through the chat box with anything to add. But she and I have put this together jointly, so everything that I'm saying is coming from Helen as well. We do want to let you know that we are recording this. We do record all of our office hours, and we are still working on getting all of those edited and put onto our website so that you will be able to look back through the archive of each of them, and we will try to make them so that you can see exactly when each topic is discussed, so you won't have to listen to the whole thing. You can kind of just cut right to the section that is of particular interest to you. So just again, wanting to make you aware that we are recording. So if you don't want to be on the recording on video, you have the option to not share video. If you are okay with that, then you are welcome to stay on video, whatever you prefer. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and talk through some of these things. We know that there are a lot of questions right now, particularly around special education and providing services for students with disabilities during this shutdown period. And again, we are well aware that, that directors are really being inundated with information from so many different organizations and so many different perspectives. And one of the things that we in particular are doing, Helen and I are doing at our office, is we are sort of in charge of navigating through all of that information and trying to tease out the consistencies, what is a fact, a mandate, what is simply a suggestion or recommendation, and then try to, again, sort of keep that information current for all of you. So a couple of things we know that many folks around not only our state, but across the nation are feeling very apprehensive about possible litigation. We know that that is very prevalent on everyone's minds. You know, what's going to happen when all this is said and done? Are we going to be faced with a ton of due process cases because we're in violation of FAPE? All of those things are weighing heavily on everyone's minds. So again, we wanted to sort of just provide some reassurance and some things, that messages that are coming consistently, not only from ODE, but again from the federal level at the U.S. Department of Education and Office of Civil Rights. So sort of three priorities that CASE, that is the Council for Administrators, of Special Education, have sort of prioritized. They actually have four, but the fourth is really about self-care, and we weren't going to spend time talking about that, but sort of three big priorities to think about in terms of service. The first is, first and foremost, safety and health for everyone, students, families, and also educators, supersedes everything else that we're doing right now. So that has to be the number one focus and priority of all educators at this time. Secondly, is that provision of FAPE, that, you know, we want you to deliver services in the best way that you can, obviously to as many students as possible, and do so in a way that is reasonable and is doable. We understand, and so do you know, legislators understand that there are some things that are not going to look the way they do normally under normal circumstances, and that's okay. But again, our call is to deliver that FAPE to, you know, as many students as possible, and make that good faith effort. And so that really comes into that third priority, which is to document what you're doing. Make sure that that documentation is very focused, that it's specific to what is being done, that it's consistent. It needs to be gathered consistently, not sort of hit or miss, but you want to make sure that you've got a great paper trail, if you will, of what is being done and what exactly the district is providing. Make sure that it's detailed so that it can be easily understood what was provided, when, by whom, how the student responded, and you know, how things are being tailored or are being specialized. The whole goal in your documentation is to demonstrate that good faith effort. And the reason you're going to hear me refer to good faith effort over and over again is because that is the litmus that a courtroom, you know, that a mediator, or in the event of due process, that is what they look at. They look at FAPE, which I should back up and say this. If you listen to our Special Ed Connect that we recorded a week ago, I talked a lot about this at that time, that FAPE is that free and public education, but the real critical piece in a time like we're in right now is that it is in light of the child's circumstances. That's critical to remember, because everyone's circumstances have radically changed right now. So when you think about FAPE, FAPE looks different right now than it did 2 months ago, because the child's circumstances have radically changed. So you have to bear that in mind. The other piece of FAPE, as I said, when you're in some kind of litigation, what is looked for is that the district made a good faith effort in earnest to provide those adequate services. So that's what you're documenting, your good faith effort, because that's what you're making right now in this time of closure during the pandemic. It is not reasonable to expect that districts can provide exactly what they provided before. So you're documenting, again, that good faith effort that you're making. Okay, so a couple of considerations for special education. And I sort of touched on this a little bit already. Is the work that is being given to students, is it accessible and is it accommodated? So, you know, general ed teachers may be sending home packets, they may be putting things online, they may be have assignments in Google Classroom or any of those types of venues or formats, but is there some accommodation being done for the students with disabilities? Is there a way to tailor that work, or again, accommodate it or modify it somehow? Is there a way to focus any of the work or assignments or learning activities to have them focus on goals in order to measure progress? And then certainly be thinking about, are you engaging with all students and families, and document how that's happening. We are hearing reports that there are, you know, teachers who are reaching out, not getting any response from students or getting a response from families. That is going to happen because Helen and I were just talking about this earlier today, that there are some families who are simply just overwhelmed. Think about homes where someone is still perhaps working, there's multiple children at home, all trying to learn virtually and remotely, and someone is trying to navigate that and support that at home. You know, there certainly will be families and students who are not responding. Quite frankly, we very likely could have some situations where we have students who have someone who is ill in the home or is missing. So what's important is that the district documents the attempts, document all of the times and the ways that our teachers are trying to engage, and make sure that those are all captured, And again, that is one of those things that, you know, you have no control over, whether or not students and families engage back and participate, but certainly documenting what the district is doing. Okay, a couple of other considerations. And again, I sort of already talked about this, but making that good faith effort. But now we really want to think about engaging with families to determine what does FAPE look like for this student. Because remember what I said about FAPE, it is in light of the child's circumstances. Every student right now has a unique set of circumstances. Although we are all on shelter in place orders and we're all working or learning remotely, that looks different for every family. So make sure that you are considering how you are talking through that with each family, and having input from the family to determine that FAPE, and make sure that you're capturing and documenting that. You also want to consider the level of support that families might need, and the level of consultation that might be needed, because we are in an unprecedented way right now asking families to step up and play the part of teacher or teaching assistant. They certainly are bearing a lot of the burden because we can't be there and we can't be together. So they may need some coaching, some consultation, or some other form of support. So certainly we need to consider that. And again, make sure that we're doing our due diligence to provide that if possible. And just a side note, we don't want to forget about any needs that might arise for our students on 504s. Just because they're not on an IEP does not mean that they may not need some specialized level of support or additional considerations during this time of remote learning. So certainly look at 504s and determine, again, what students and families might need. We certainly need to ensure that any accommodations that are on a 504 or an IEP are being provided to the maximum extent possible in this new format of learning. This is a link to a tool that we just found that is, it's a scan tool so that districts can use it to sort of test the accessibility and equity features of whatever virtual format they're using. So since, you know, Helen and I obviously are not teaching, we're not holding Google Classroom with assignments and things like that, we haven't been able to test it, but it's our understanding that the way it works is that you sort of you fill out the form, you put in whatever you're using, whatever model or format venue you're using, and it will literally sort of do an assessment of barriers that may be there for accessibility. So we just thought that was something that was helpful. That's the link to the tool itself, and then sort of the document that describes it. And then on this next slide, this is a quick, very short how-to. So it's literally how-to instructions and how to use it. So we thought that might be something that could be beneficial. Okay, so I'm going to take a minute again to talk about documenting that good faith effort, because we cannot stress enough that that really is going to be what, for lack of a better term, what sort of saves a district if there were to be, you know, any litigious parents who would, you know, kind of contest that there was a provision of FAPE. Having that strong documentation is what's going to, you know, sort of mitigate or eliminate any of those types of problems. So the things that you want to be documenting, I already talked about documenting what you're doing with students and families, but you also need to document the procedural things, because FAPE is not only about the provision of services and education, but FAPE also includes the procedural aspects of a child's education. So you definitely want to document whether there's agreement or non-agreement, any extension to timelines, as you all undoubtedly know, and we've put this out there, that the guidance right now does give us some flexibility around like initial evaluations, because obviously it's very difficult to do testing and observations during this time. But anything that the district and the family agree on for a timeline extension, or disagree, as the case may be, needs to be documented. And you can simply do that, through a PRO1. Any new services, that's probably less likely to be taking place, but it could be if there was a specific need that arose because of this. There could be some type of new service being started, or there are some families who have requested that services stop during the shutdown. They're too overwhelmed. It's they're doing all they can just to shelter in place and keep some kind of schedule, and certainly thinking about our families with multiple children in the home. There are some families who really do not want services at this time, and they have that right to ask that. So certainly if you are temporarily discontinuing anything, again, you want to make sure you're documenting that in a PRO1. If there's FERPA information regarding virtual access, so if students are engaging in real-time things where people can see others, they can see one another, excuse me, and a parent doesn't want that and disagrees, you certainly want to capture that. And I'll talk a little bit more about FERPA in more detail towards the end, but that might be something that you want to document. If you have any temporary plans for learning during the next couple of months, and we are going to share a suggestion for a distance learning plan here in a few slides, that's certainly a way that you could document that. And then, we've already talked about this, making sure that you are taking into consideration parent input and having them be a part of the decision-making process about what this looks like for students. Okay, so regarding that documentation, this is a tool that we thought was very helpful. This was actually put together by Case, and it works in essence like an Excel sheet. There are separate tabs for every student. So there is a place to document the date, either the content area or the IEP goal that was focused on, who it was provided by, exactly what was done, any accommodations or modifications that were provided. Unique tailoring would be, again, just anything that is being done to sort of supplant or to tweak the instruction or the materials specific for the child. And then there are a couple of other columns there that are cut off here, but again, just a way to capture all of the things that the district is doing and that the teacher is doing. So again, we can't stress enough how important documentation is during this time. We thought this one was a really nice tool. So this is a live link. All the links that you see here are live. So if you click on that, it will take you right to it, and you simply make a copy, and then it can be utilized by as many staff members as needed. Okay. Okay, and again, definitely we cannot stress enough how important it is to use those prior written notices. A prior written notice is, your best friend because it does tell the story from the perspective of the district. So it is, again, your opportunity to capture what has been agreed upon, what's being done, and or any disagreement, as the case may be, but again, sort of to capture that information. We do suggest, now that we know that we are moving into an extended period of remote learning, you know, beyond that initial April date that we first looked at, and now we're looking into May. And I think that many of us suspect that that could extend through the rest of the school year. Of course, we don't know that officially, but I think many of us expect that to happen. So as you move more fully into a true sort of distance learning model, we definitely would suggest considering using a distance learning plan. And again, here's a live link to one that was created by CASE that's very simple and easy to follow, but it gives the district an opportunity to work with the family to sort of document what learning will look like. Again, there is not an expectation that it should look the same, that it should consist of the same number of minutes or hours, that, you know, that may need to be tailored. One of the other things that has been stated, again, at the state and federal level, there is not an expectation that districts need to go out and amend every single IEP, because it's, you know, again, this is a pandemic that is affecting everyone. So again, it is not a matter of the district is deciding to change things for the provision of services, but rather change is sort of being cast upon all of us at the same time. So in lieu of amending, and there could be cases where if something is radically changed, that you need to amend an IEP, but in lieu of doing that, certainly creating a distance learning plan where you are mapping out what the expectation is for you know, both the district and the family of what's going to happen over the course of the next month or beyond that. So again, that's just one of the tools that we found very helpful. Okay, so I said one of our goals is hopefully to alleviate some of the apprehension and anxiety that we know many of our you know, administrators are feeling. So going back to thinking about a procedural violation of FAPE. These are sort of the things that a hearing officer might look for and would determine that a child did not receive FAPE only if one of these things were to happen. That the district impeded the child's right to FAPE, or significantly impeded the parent's opportunity to participate in the decision-making process regarding how FAPE would be provided, or obviously caused a deprivation of educational benefits, which is the one that we typically think of, that services were not provided that were appropriate for the child. But we have bolded here that middle section because, again, this is why we're harping so significantly on documentation and making sure that you're involving the family, because they really do need to be part of that decision-making process. And it's easy right now during this time with all of the juggling that everyone is doing, and we're trying to do Zoom videos, and we're trying to send home packets, and all the things that educators are juggling, to forget to have that engagement with the family and involve them in the decision making. So again, that's why we want to draw your attention to that, because that is one of the key things that a hearing officer would certainly look for. And that, again, is why we wholly support the idea of a distance learning plan. Okay, so we did want to talk quickly through a few of the confidentiality considerations. Again, these are questions that have been brought up frequently about FERPA, thinking about, you know, sort of the virtual platform that everyone's or most districts are utilizing now. And it's important to remember that FERPA prevents the release of that, you know, personally identifiable information, but it's really what's contained in the educational records. It really was not designed to be talking about being able to see someone. That's not a violation of FERPA. So it's really about that personally identifiable information. It's anything that could be used to trace a student's identity, and identify them as a student with a disability. Okay, so simply being able to see multiple students together in a small group setting on Zoom is not a violation of FERPA in and of itself. Some districts are requiring parents to sign a formal agreement before they participate in sort of small group virtual activities, but not all districts are doing that. Some have decided not to, but they are agreeing not to allow any recording of that, and the district has determined that they'll not record it and store that information, or they're not going to post it anywhere. They're not going to put it on their website. And that really is sufficient. But again, some districts have taken that extra step in requiring parents to give sort of a formal consent for participation. And that really is a local decision. One thing we would advise in terms of those small groups, those virtual groups of classrooms, that will ensure that you don't have a violation of FERPA is make sure that they stay focused on instruction. So there should be no discussion of students' disabilities, no discussion of the contents of their IEP, or any other sensitive information that would possibly identify a student as having a disability, because that's really what FERPA protects. So as long as you stay away from those topics and you keep those virtual settings to instruction, you will be fine. A couple of do's and don'ts. We do want to highly suggest that districts and teachers allow options. So allow for participants to be videoed so that you can see their image and hear their voice, or voice only. Allow calling in by phone, or allow opting out altogether. There are some families who may be very uncomfortable with participating virtually in real time, and you should have other options available, like discussion boards or email or phone conferences or things like that, where they're not forced to participate virtually in real time with others. And certainly be careful and be cautious, especially when you're using video and images, and adhere to the guidelines that we sort of just suggested. Make sure that you are not discussing anything that would be a violation of FERPA. And then in terms of consent, just, again, when in doubt, don't let it out. Basically, don't let any information get out there that you would have to have consent for. So again, following the guidelines that we just discussed in the previous slide should certainly take care of that. And then one thing we did want to say, don't forget that we still have obligations as mandated reporters, even when our knowledge or suspicion or indication that there could be a problem comes from teaching or interacting with a family virtually. If a teacher is, or anyone else is online, again, through any of the venues that are being utilized right now, and sees something that would warrant, reporting, we are still required to do that. So that's just a reminder there. And finally, this is just something that Helen and I, this literally just came out within the last hour. We just thought this was such a nice tool that we wanted to share it. If you've not seen it, it was sent out by OAPSA, but this was created by the Ohio Board of DDs. And you're only seeing the very top portion here on my screen. It's actually a two-sided document, so there's much more beyond this, but it is intended for people with significant disabilities who may need to go to the hospital if there is the possibility that they are infected with COVID-19. Most, I should say, hospitals are not allowing additional people to go with that individual, even when they even could perhaps be nonverbal. We are hearing reports of that they are not allowing a support person to come in, obviously in an effort to keep everyone safe and healthy. So again, the Ohio DDs have put this together. That is something that can be handed to a medical professional that very nicely describes the unique needs of the individual with a disability, talks about what they need assistance with, if that's communication, whether it's physical assistance. All of those things can be documented, again, to help the healthcare workers really understand the particular needs of an individual and be able to, support them in the best way so that it's at least amount of fear and as minimize the scariness of it. Let's put it that way, because certainly for our folks with more significant disabilities, that would be a very frightening experience to have to go without a support person. So we just kind of wanted to pass this along. The next slide, you will see this is the link right here. That's the live link to get that document. And on the same page, the Ohio Department of Health has also put together a very nice little chart that kind of goes through all of the possible symptoms of both COVID-19, common cold, and the flu. Again, you're just seeing the very top part of it, but it's color coded, and it's just kind of a nice little, again, tool that they put together. And those are both literally on the same page, so that's why we thought we would share that as well. But this, again, is that live link to the passport in case, you do know families who would appreciate having that. Okay, that is everything that we had to talk through. We did want to share that we did again record our Special Ed Connect last week. We had intended for that to be a live Zoom session. Unfortunately, we were the victims of hacking, as were many folks on that day across the country. And we tried it twice and were hacked twice. So we did record that, and it is available on our website. And we did also blast it out on our newsletter in case you, didn't see that. It is available on our website. We do anticipate doing another session of Special Ed Connect where we will try again to bring sort of the latest guidance around special education, and hopefully have more news on flexibilities and extensions and on timelines and all of those kinds of things. And we will very likely talk through some of the guidance around graduation as well. That is our hope. So kind of watch for that. We hope that will be coming in the next couple of weeks. And again, we will certainly advertise it on our website and send it out on our listserv as well. So what we're going to do now is kind of just open it up for any additional questions that we may not have covered. And you are free to use the chat box if you like, or you can certainly unmute yourself and ask, and we'll try to tackle those as best we can.